Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Crypto Warehouse. My name is Mike. It is February the 28th. Special one. It is not the same type of stream that we normally do on Maple Finance, where we go through absolutely everything. There was a very big Q1 call a couple of days ago, and what we have is the slides from that, and we're going to go through them on this stream. We're also going to basically start the stream with a who is Maple Finance? Who are they? Go through their website very quickly. Go through June, have a look at their X account. We're going to do all of that very, very quickly. And then we're going to get into the AIMED, and then we're going to look at the Syrup token, and then we're going to give you our conclusion. Now, excuse me, there's a few people in chat. Manjeet is here. Hidden Agendas is here. I think Leo is here. If we go over and have a quick look, we have Rafi is here. Shamin is here. Bitcoin Buyer is here. Good morning to you all. Very quickly, just a reminder, we are going to give away some syrup, which is the token of Maple Finance. We're going to give away some syrup to the person who asks the best question in chat. Okay, I'm going to remind you a couple of times throughout the stream, and we're going to answer the question at the end. So, ask questions in chat, and the best question will be answered at the end, and we will give you syrup tokens. We will send it to you on Binance. So, if you're watching somewhere else, we're going to need your Binance user ID to give you those tokens. So I hope you all understand where we are going with that. Just let me hit refresh to make sure that we are still up and running on Binance Square, and then we will begin. Yes, we are. Okay, so we are running perfectly fine. Now then, let me switch over to the chat and we can begin. And there I am, in all my glory. Good morning to you all. Let me just drop that down a little bit so you can see. Okay, we're going to start off very quickly. I know a lot of you that have watched this before, you already know who Maple Finance are, but there are a few new people in chat, so we're going to go through it very quickly. Maple Finance are the largest on-chain asset manager in the world. They have a suite of products that they offer. Syrup USDC, Syrup USDT, they are the two main dollar yielding assets that they have. They also have, for institutions, over-collateralized lending opportunities. There is a token associated with Maple Finance, which is called Syrup. And what I am going to do very quickly is I am going to pin that in chat. So very quickly, I will pin permanently the Syrup token. So the token that's pinned on your screen now, that is the token of Maple Finance, and that will be on the screen throughout the stream. So should you wish to pick up a bag of syrup, and obviously we don't want to talk too much about what's going on in the world right now, but that does cause prices to be depressed and maybe a good opportunity for you to look at the token. So the key here is to look at their main flagship product. Now, when we first started covering Maple Finance, they had different products. They had a Bitcoin yielding asset, but this really, in the last 12 months, has become their mainstay, their flagship product, and that's the Syrup USDC USDT. Now, you might ask, why do they have both? They have both because liquidity on different chains comes in different forms. So, for example, on Ethereum, for example, USDT is stronger. On Plasma, USDT is stronger. But on the likes of Solana, you'd be looking to pick up USDC. Now, these are liquid yielding dollars. What that means, very simply put, if you buy $100 of either of these tokens today, and the APY stays at 4.5%, in 12 months' time, you would have $104.50. That's how it works. So you don't have to trade it. You don't have to stake it. You don't have to lock it up. If it sits in your wallet on Binance or anywhere else, it will grow by 4.5% every year if, of course, the interest rate stays the same. Now, this is open for everybody outside of the USA. So if you're watching in America, you cannot have access to it. Now then, they also have Maple Institutional Secured Lending. That's coming in with a collateralized ratio of 135%. That was way over 350% back in October, November, when we were running up to all-time highs. That's paying 5.7%. And this is just a very quick breakdown. They have so far, they have borrowed $24.32 billion, over 100 borrowers, over 400 loans issued, and the funding time is 24 hours. That is pretty much it. And then we don't need to go through too much of this down here because we don't have too much time. Now, this is their assets under management coming in at 3.81 billion. Please bear in mind, when we were at all-time highs in October, this was at $5 billion. Now, the market has come down 50% since then. 50%. So you would expect assets under management to come down to 2.5 billion. But as we said in the last stream, that's not how it works. This is a growing business, and a lot of the assets under management are in Bitcoin. That's come down in price. So you can see, even though they have come down about 22% in assets under management, that reflects pretty well on the business as a whole, because in theory, had they stood still, it would stand at 2.5 billion. Now, we're going to go through June analytics, then we're going to look at the X account, and then we're going to go through the Q1 call. We've got a lot to get through, okay? Now, remember, if you're in chat, ask a question, okay? Ask a question, and we will answer. Now, Leo has asked a question, which we will get to. Yeah, okay, good question, Leo. Very good question. We'll get to that one. Now, let's make this a little bit bigger. Again, we've covered this pretty much on every stream, which we do on Maple Finance, which is about 2 times a month. And this kind of shows you at a glance where my Maple Finance is. And I've said this again each stream. During this growth period towards all-time highs, I clearly said there will come a point in the bear market where this plateaus, because nothing goes up or down forever. We've had a 2-year, pretty much a 2-year bull run, culminating in October the 7th, the $126,000 all-time high, and we've plateaued. Now, what's important to take away from this is the growth of the two yielding dollar assets, USDT and USDC. If we go back over here to probably April last year, where the assets under management were $750 million, you'll see that Maple Institutional Secured Lending was up there, the blue chip secured lending was up there, and Syrup USDT was coming in at $58 million. If we come forward, however many months that is, 9 months, 10 months, you'll see it's at $1 billion. So we've really seen explosive growth in these two products. And even though we're plateauing because we're going through a bear market. And rather than coming down, Maple Finance is swimming against the current. It's actually growing in size, even though the market is coming down in value. And I think that's an important thing to understand here. You can look at any business that's in the real world asset niche, and you will see the asset price come down in value because the underlying assets are coming down, because the prices are coming down. But what Maple Finance is doing is swimming against the tide and growing. Just to give you an example, if Bitcoin was at $126,000 today, the Maple Finance AUM is more than likely going to be about 7.6 billion. So they were at 5 billion in October. They should in theory be at 7.5 billion today. That's a 50% growth in 5 months. But of course, the asset price of Bitcoin has come down. So of course they've come down. Again, why do we use June? It's independent. Why do we use June? Because it's on-chain data. We can check things in real time, which is what we're doing right now. You can see down here, interest paid. Basically, interest paid to you guys is coming in at $138 million. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was about $129 million on the last stream, which I think was about 2 weeks ago. So I think they've paid out about $9 million in the last 2 weeks. Total loan originations has now just broken 24 billion. Okay, so this isn't a small company. This is a fairly large company. Now, further down here, the one thing that we're not going to go through all of these different charts, do not worry. The one thing that we want to talk about down here is the Maple Finance Protocol revenue. Now, you will hear something called ARR, which basically is annualized revenue. And what you do is you take any one of these and you times it by 12 to give you an annualized revenue. Now, we're getting to the end of February, which, of course, is 3 days shorter than January, and we're coming in at $2.1 million, which would give us an annualized revenue of about $25 million. If we go back to January, which had three more days, we would be coming in at about $30 million ARR. So the company has grown. They've done more in February so far than they did in November. The final days are not in for February. We've still got today to go, so it's likely to go a little bit higher. But still, in this bear market, with this correction to the downside, they've still brought in $2 million in revenue. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, about why that is important, because they use a proportion, 25% of their revenue, to go and buy back Syrup tokens. But we're going to talk about that when we go through the Q1 call. So not too much data on a Saturday morning, I understand. We're going to go and have a look at their X account very, very briefly. I am going to try and get to the report. It's only 10 past 10. We've still got another 45, 50 minutes to go. So we've got plenty of time to get through this. But the one thing that we're not going to be covering today is any of the latest updates. So I want to go through here very quickly. We've covered the base integration with Aave. We don't need to talk about that. This is what we are going to be covering. Where is it? This one. This is what we're going to be covering today. This is the Q1 token holder update. We do have these slides. This is what we're going to be talking about. Further down here, we can go through whatever else they've been talking about. Total bridge volume a few days ago surpassed $5 billion. The Q1 investor call, I think we're pretty much caught up on this. We only need to go back to about February the 15th, because that is when we streamed. And actually, no, the last time we streamed was Valentine's Day, so February the 14th, which was 2 weeks ago. So we don't have to go back too far. I think pretty much that's it. One of the most important things about Maple Finance is they are multi-chain. They have collabs with the likes of Chainlink, with Aave, with Camino Finance. They are on Solana. They are on Ethereum. They are on Arbitrum. They are on Plasma. They are everywhere. And of course, the more chains they are on, the more breadth the roots have of the tree to grow the tree stronger. And again, I don't want to cover too much of this off because we're going to go through it in the Q1 call, which we're going to bring up right now. Now, very quickly, I'm going to switch screens a second and I'm going to double check on how we are doing on here. Nazar has come in with a question. That's a good question, Nazir. Very good question. I like that. Yep. I'm going to put that and Leo's question into the notepad. And again, I'm not going to interrupt the stream by reading out every question, but we have some questions now. That's good. So if you have a question about Maple Finance, if you have a question about how they are operating or how they work, ask it in chat. If I read that question out at the end of the stream, then you win Syrup tokens. And I'm going to be paying the Syrup tokens on Binance Square. So Nazir has asked a very good question so far. Leo has asked a very good question so far. Feel free to ask questions and we will look at them as we get towards the end of the stream. Excuse me. Now then, this is what we're going to be talking about. This is the Q1 token holder update. Now, this was only, I think, on Thursday. I watched it on Thursday night. Today is Saturday. It's still pretty new. One of the things to understand about Maple Finance or any similar company, you have to listen into their spaces. You have to listen in to their updates because they give away alpha that might not be picked up by mainstream media. And I mean the likes of Coinbase, Cointelegraph. I don't mean the likes of The Guardian. So you're going to miss out if you don't listen in and watch into these events. Now, this was only for about 40 minutes. It had Joe and it had Sid, two of the members of Maple Finance, basically going through what has happened, what is happening, and what will come to pass. It sounds like an episode of Lord of the Rings, but there we go. So this was the token holder update. Basically, this is the agenda that we're going to run through now. The progress so far this year, the risk management and portfolio health, which might answer some of Nazir's questions as well. The growth of their yield, dollar yielding assets, the scaling of the business, the sourcing of capital and allocating the capital, the legal structure and value accrual, and the SIRRP strategic fund. Now, the legal structure and value accrual, they said something in there which I didn't expect. And when we get to that, you'll understand why. Now, this is so far how they have done so far. We're at $3.79 billion asset under management. We've already shown you that. The monthly revenue is coming in, or the all-time high monthly revenue came in at 2.57 million. Now, the target they are looking at is $100 million ARR. Now, you divide that by 12 and you get to about, just call it $8.5 million for argument's sake. I know it's a little bit more than 100, but call it $8.5 million. So they're going to try and scale the business from where they are today by roughly 3 to 4x. So where they are today with 3.8 billion assets under management, 2.57, they're going to try and scale that. Now, they don't necessarily need to multiply the assets under management by 3 or 4 to get to the target. But if we did that, for argument's sake, we'd be looking at about $12 billion asset under management. My target for this year was 10 billion. Same kind of ballpark. That would give them a monthly revenue, if it's scaled linearly, I can't even say that word, that would give them a monthly revenue of about $8.5 million. The current ARR all-time high is coming in at 31 million. That is what they're trying to get to 100 million. Now, deposit growth, they have added just under $300 million of deposits in Q1. And bear in mind, we're only 2 months into the quarter. Cross-chain flows, we've just told you, have hit 5 billion. And yield performance is 120 basis points, which is about 1.2%. Year-to-date originations, that's the loans that they've added so far this year, coming in at 3.3 billion. And the NIM is 128 basis points. Now then, again, one of the things that's really important to understand about Maple Finance is these are over-collateralized loans. So a blue chip comes to Maple Finance and says, we need a loan of $100 million. Maple Finance will say, absolutely, KYC, AML, all of that is all done, all above board. You will need to supply us with, for example, $150 million worth of Bitcoin as collateral. That's what collateral is. That's then deposited with Maple Finance. Maple Finance release the $100 million. It's over collateralized, which means the institution has to give Maple more in assets than they are borrowing. Now, you might think that's crazy, but an institution doesn't want to sell their Bitcoin. They might be sitting on 10,000 Bitcoin and they don't want to sell it, but there's a lot of value locked up in that 10,000 Bitcoin. So what they do is they can borrow against it, and they can say to Maple Finance, right, we're going to give you 10,000 Bitcoin. We want to borrow against that. We want to borrow $40 million. Maple Finance say absolutely fine. They then borrow that money. They then use that money to add more value, and then they repay their loan and they get their Bitcoin back. It stops the company having to liquidate their treasury or liquidate their Bitcoin holdings. Now, we have seen some absolutely massive potential liquidation events go on in the last year. April, we had Liberation Day. October the 10th, we had one. In February, early February, was it February the 10th, February the 7th, we had another one. Throughout all of those, there have been 0 defaults. the collateral has remained at about 160%. So $160 million worth of Bitcoin for $100 million worth of loans. And the margin calls were cured in roughly 3 hours. Now, a margin call is very simple. If I put up $150 million worth of Bitcoin and I have a loan of $100 million and the Bitcoin price drops 20%, my collateral goes from 150 million to 120 million. And it gets very close to the value of the loan. So Maple Finance call you and say your loan, collateral on your loan is starting to fall. Can you top up the collateral on your loan? Now, what most of the clients will do is send in 20, 30, 40 million dollars worth of Bitcoin to top up the collateral on the loan. That then brings it back above 150, 160%, and everybody's fine. That's what that 74 margin calls means. They have either closed the loan, added more collateral to the loan, but the loan has been fixed, basically. Now, the reason that there are margin calls is very simple. If my $150 million worth of Bitcoin falls to $90 million worth of Bitcoin, but I have $100 million worth of loan, then I simply don't repay the loan, and Maple Finance have lost $10 million. So it's important that the mechanisms are in place for Maple Finance to be able to deal with this. And as the collateral falls with the price of Bitcoin, they have mechanisms and procedures to deal with their clients and basically bring the collateral back up. So that's why it's important to understand the defaults being zero, balanced off against the 74 margin calls that have all been resolved within 3 hours. And 3 hours is pretty quick, bear in mind. To potentially send across tens of millions of dollars of Bitcoin as collateral is pretty impressive. Now then, the scaling of their token has been nothing shy of meteoric. They have partnered with some incredibly large institutions. The biggest one towards the end of last year was, of course, Aave. I think there was an announcement only yesterday or the day before that Aave had crossed $1 trillion at some point worth of assets under management at one point. I'm not saying they've got $1 trillion right now. I mean, cumulatively, I think it was $1 trillion or something like that. But they have expanded across different ecosystems simultaneously, may I add. The biggest one for me was going from Ethereum to Solana. That was the big one for me. And I think they partnered with the likes of Radium or Orca. And of course, they partnered with Camino Finance, and they used Chainlink as well. So all the big household names were used in that. And as you can see here, the caps that are placed on there, they've got Base at 200 million, Plasma at 157, Ethereum at 150 million. This is the Aave expansion only. Now, what's important about this is you might turn around and say, well, why can't Maple Finance just have $2 billion on every chain? Because the Syrup USDC and Syrup USDT are backed by the assets held on those loans. So if they have got $2 billion worth of loans, they can't issue $4 billion worth of Syrup USDT or USDC because there is no collateral. There's no backing to that. So the caps are in place. So Maple Finance can say, listen, we've got $500 million worth of loans. We're going to put 200 million onto Ethereum, 200 million onto Solana, and 100 million onto Plasma. And that's why there is a cap in place. So it makes sense. It makes sense. Now, there is $850 million on the Sky ecosystem as well as the $570 million on Aave, and they are both going to scale. One of the things that I was trying to highlight over the course, to probably from about August onwards last year, was starting to think about when Bitcoin goes to all-time highs, when Ethereum goes to all-time highs, and you want to lock in your profits, you want to be bringing your profits back to stables. Your options really are you bring them back to stables or you go and deposit them on your bank paying 0.5% or 0.25% or whatever. And one of the strategies I said was basically look to yield-bearing fiat, yield-bearing dollars. And there's more than syrup out there. In fact, I think I even have this to show you. And this was the chart that I brought up a couple of weeks ago. And this is basically, when this loads, here we go. Right, okay. These are the yield bearing stables, it's called on DeFi Llama. So one of my strategies was, yes, you can bring your profits back to fiat, but remember, inflation eats your profits. Inflation eats away at the purchasing power of your dollar. So what you need to do is you need to find somewhere where you can earn interest above and beyond inflation. So if inflation is at 2%, you need to find somewhere that's paying you 2.5, 3% to stay ahead of inflation. And this is a really good at-a-glance chart. It shows you all the yield-bearing dollar assets. USDS, USDE, USDC syrup, USDT syrup, USDT Aave. Now, what's important to understand here is if you combine the two Maples, you actually end up with 4.5, 4.6 billion, which makes Maple the second largest dollar yielding asset in the world. Okay, it comes in just behind Sky. Sky's at 5.17, Maple's at 4.6. It's pretty close. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is if you look at the APY, you have 4.34 and 4.55 on Maple. But if you look up and down that screen in front of you, the only other one that is above 4% is Sky. Now, it doesn't really matter if it's 3.5 or 4, it's still beating inflation. So if you look at, say, Merkle, 0.44%, if you look at Aave version 3 at 1.92%, if inflation where you are is 2%, you're not even parity. So when you get your yield, you have to look at a minimum of inflation wherever you are. And obviously, if you're not in America, you then have the currency risk as well. But that's an important thing to take into account. And of course, they did exceptionally well tying up with Aave, because Aave really is that's the blue ribboned. That's the one you want to be partnering with. They are the biggest in crypto. There was somebody talking the other day about the fact that if anything happened to Aave, it would put such a big hole into DeFi that they don't know. The repercussions of Aave unwinding would be horrific. So Aave are that big. The question is, are they too big to fail? Probably. They've seen out many bear markets. They've been around for many cycles. I remember back when they were using a very pixelated version of their product. It was horrific to look at, but it's been around for a very long time. Right, very quickly, before we move on, I am going to switch over here. Just give me 1 second to do this. If you are on Binance or if you are somewhere else, we're going to be giving away a prize. If you ask me a question that I read out at the end of this stream, we will give you syrup tokens. We've only got a couple of questions so far from Nazir and also from Leo. Ask a question, we will answer it in chat. Now, let's go back to where we were. Right then, so establishing Maple as the largest and most influential on-chain asset manager, they have broken that into capital sourcing and capital allocation. Basically, where do they get the assets from? Who do they take on as clients? And then how do they allocate that capital? We don't need to talk too much about every slide, but this is the 3 different strategies that Maple Finance have. And again, a lot of this has been done. So DeFi, building on the 2025 adoption, as I've said before, they're on all the major chains. They're about to be on Binance Smart Chain. They had a partnership, which we talked about 2 weeks ago. They're going to be on Binance Smart Chain. They're on Solana. They're on the majority of chains that Aave are on. So that's pretty much done. The next 2 are the exciting ones, which is exchanges, wallets, apps. and neobanks and savings. This is where I think Maple Finance have got two real objectives. They have to bring on clients who want to collateralize their loans, who want to borrow loans. Take out loans against their collateral. That's the objective, to get the money in. And the second one is to find places where they can generate clients to take on that demand, or that supply, sorry. Now, of course, I think Joe mentioned this in the stream, but it pricked my ears up. He was talking about earn programs with exchanges. And I don't know whether that was in relation to the Syrup token. I think it was. But the way to look at this is, can you get Syrup USDT today on Binance? Yes, you can. So they're on Binance, potentially going on to other exchanges, which we won't mention the name of. Number one, can you find a passive way of earning yield if you have it on your Phantom wallet, for example, or MetaMask wallet? Potentially, that's another way of looking at it. And then, of course, if you've got the likes of, I don't know, Nexo, for example, can they do partnerships there? That's kind of one angle. And then the other angle, which is probably the biggest one of all, is fintech. So if I just say Robinhood and Revolut, two R's, if Maple Finance can get their foot in the door of, say, Revolut have tens, if not hundreds of millions of clients, and they can offer a yield of 4% on Revolut, they are potentially opening up billions and billions of dollars of demand for their product. The same with the newcomers. There's a lot of new apps coming on board, new savings apps coming on board that are tapping into DeFi. I think the neobanks, I think that's where that's where the majority of the demand for their products is going to come from. I think it's a brilliant untapped market. And if you look in America right now, and you look at the Genius Act, you look at the Clarity Act, you look at everything they're doing over there, what's the conversation about? It's not about, is crypto good or bad anymore. We've moved past that. The conversation is about this. Traditional banks in America do not want stablecoins to pay a yield. Why? Because there will be a bank run. Banks run a fractionalized system. So every $100 that you've got with the Bank of America, they will have maybe $1 or 50 cents on their books, and the rest of it they have loaned out to earn interest for them. So they're making 6-7% interest on your money, and they're paying you 0.25%. Or if they're in government bonds, government debt, they're getting 3.54%, and you're getting 0.25%. All of that money in the middle is being kept by the Bank of America. What the likes of Maple Finance can do is say, we can give you Syrup USDT and we can pay you 4%. Now, if 100 people, 1,000 people go and do that, it's not a problem. If we have large-scale adoption of stablecoin yield and dollar-yielding assets, such as Maple Finance, because Maple Finance doesn't fall under the Genius Act or the Clarity Act. But if we have a situation where you can have USDC, USDT, Syrup USDC, there'll be a bank run. The banks will lose all of their money. It'll destabilize the entire banking system, because we're talking about potentially $500 or $600 billion leaving the banking system and going into stable coins and dollar yielding assets. It would be the end. So that's the argument going on with banks and stable coins at the minute. And Maple Finance is in the middle, which it doesn't fall under the stablecoin legislation, which is fine, but it also allows people to offer that yield. So there is an opportunity for Maple to fill the gap and say, you know what, guys, we can provide a yield of about 4%, whereas the banks are paying you 0.25%. Do you want to earn 32 times, or whatever it works out as, 16 times, the interest that you're getting with your bank? I think that's the opportunity. But I don't think it's an opportunity that Bank of America, for example, should dismiss. Why can't the Bank of America offer those products at, say, 3% and then keep 1% management fee? I don't know. It's a crazy one. But I think fintech is the future for this. Now, the capital allocation. Now, if we remember, we talked here capital sourcing and capital allocation. Capital sourcing is DeFi, CeFi, and fintech. Capital allocation, Maple Lending, established network continuing to take the market share, which is what they're doing. I think Joe or one of them mentioned that Maple Finance was about 8% of the market, something like that he mentioned, which is pretty impressive. Nearly $1 in 10 sits with Maple Finance. Maple Trading, crypto market trading strategies. They've talked about the arbitrage effect and how they're going to introduce that. We're not going to talk about that now. We're going to run out of time. New initiatives, directly funded securitization vehicles. That's a real mouthful. They're expanding their product range. Now, one of the things that I really, really wanted Maple to do is have a facility for Bitcoin. And I know there's been a lot of talk about them doing a Bitcoin yield product and things like that, but I don't know. I think they might be moving away from that and more towards Syrup USDC, Syrup USDT. It's cleaner, it's easy to manage, it's a simpler business product, it's simpler to explain to people. So maybe they're going to move away from that, I would believe. But again, this is a case of they've spent the majority of 2025 building these partnerships, and some of them are months old. The Aave deal was November, maybe October. It was really late in the year. We're talking about building relationships now where, yes, they've got $100 million here and $200 million here, but they need to build on that. And then they need to build the demand for their product. They need to work on finding more institutions that want to use their product. They partner with some massive people last year. The biggest is probably Cantor Fitzgerald. So they're in the right sphere. They're talking to the right people. And I think this slide is of everything I've talked about, this is the one that's really took me by surprise. The legal structure of Maple Finance is not what I thought it was. Okay? And I think the thing here is Syrup holders own the business. And I did not expect that, by the way. So the DAO Foundation and token holders own the business. So it has the Syrup Strategic Fund. It has all of the brand and apps IP. It's got all the tech. It's got all the protocol revenues. All go back to the DAO. The DAO and the Syrup holders own Maple Finance. It's not owned by Syrup. Syrup Sid. Sorry, it's not owned by Sid. It's not owned by Joe. It's owned by the DAO. Now, the key points here are the legal entities are all fully set up and operational. There's no equity conflict, as in there is no VC in the background trying to push the direction of the business, and all value accrues to Syrup. Now, that is the key there. Let me just make sure there's any more slides. Yeah, we'll talk about this. We'll talk about it on here. Okay. So, I said before, 25% of the revenue of Syrup goes back into buybacks. What that means is, if they make $2 million in a month, $500,000 goes to buy back the Syrup token. That's it. But they do this in the same way that Wolfies do this, which we talked about on a different stream. And that is, rather than saying, if the market is up, we're just going to buy $500,000. If the market is down, we're just going to buy $500,000. No. They are doing it in very specific ways. If, for example, today, because of what's just gone on a few hours ago, the price of Syrup will have come down. Today would be a day they would buy. So what they're really doing is they're buying the dip of their own token, and they're building up a strategic fund of USDC, USDT, and Syrup tokens, of course, and they're going to basically buy the dip every time it dips. So if for example, syrup runs to 50 cents next month, they won't buy any syrup token. They'll just sit on the cash and then wait for it to come back down in the next wave. So the Syrup Strategic Fund has 3 different objectives: opportunities to put the syrup to work, the liquidity for the token to buy it back, create a buy pressure on it, and capital reserves and buybacks. So again, they keep the funds in reserves. They will then have, should they want to expand or whatever it might be, they can use some of those assets to expand. So again, common sense. So just to confirm, the business is owned by the DAO and the syrup token holders, and this is what the strategic fund is doing with that syrup. Very impressive stuff. Now, the Maple balance sheet is pretty much what they have on the books. They have 25% of what they make is spent on the strategic syrup fund, which we just mentioned. 25% of their revenues. What's that? 500,000 and change right now. They have the holdings coming in at $74 million. Sorry, 74 million syrup tokens, which is about, I'd say about $15 million right now. Stables and liquid assets coming in at $3 million. They bought back 8 million syrup tokens in 2025. Now remember, they were nowhere for 2/3 of the year because their assets under management were scaling. So this year, you're probably going to be looking at, conservatively, probably 5 million a month, maybe. So you could be looking at the buybacks in 2026 at being about 50 million syrup, which is not a bad number. Total Maple balance sheet, 100 million syrup. Stables and liquid assets, $18 million. So they are cash-rich, asset-rich business. Their fundamentals are good. Fundamentals being the 2 objectives of a business is to add value to you, and number 2, sustain itself, as in make a profit. They make a profit and they add value. They check both of those boxes. Now, the Q&A, we are going to skip. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go and have a look at the syrup token. We've got 18 minutes left. Got plenty of time for this. Haven't given my conclusion yet. I am trying to keep an eye on chat. In fact, before we go on to the syrup price, let me very quickly switch over and have a look at chat, because my chat did freeze a second ago. Give me a second. Hit refresh. See where we are. Hopefully this will work. We've had a pretty stable stream so far today. We've had problems with streaming software. Now, I thought that was me. And then last night, CryptoFace put out a message saying that Streamalabs was down and he couldn't stream. So maybe the streaming issues I've had this week haven't actually been to do with me. Maybe they are actually to do with... maybe they're to do with the streaming software, or maybe there's a problem in the cloud somewhere. Maybe we have issues. Give me a second. Maybe we have issues otherwhere outside of here. Maybe it's not us, which would be nice, because we've had problems, not every day. Had a couple of problems yesterday, but this morning before we came live, we had massive problems. Right, I'm just going to drop a red packet for those of you that are watching on Binance Square. If you're not watching on Binance Square, we drop red packets from time to time. Now, we are going to give you a chance to win some syrup tokens before we go on to the chart. If you have a question about Maple Finance or everything or anything we've talked about today, drop the question in chat. And if I read your question out at the end, you're going to win a bag of syrup tokens, and we will be paying you on Binance, on Binance, but paying you on Binance Square. So ask a question in chat. If I read that question out, you will be a winner. The only 2 questions I have chosen so far have been from Leo and from Nazar. They're the only 2 questions that I have chosen out of all of the ones that we have had so far. So let me move back on now to talk about the syrup chart. which is here. Let's close that down. We don't need that now. Now, if we take the all-time high as our benchmark, which was about here. So I think this was all-time high, okay? We had the all-time high of Bitcoin on October the 6th, October the 7th, and then we had the 1010, which was this absolute massive wick down that took Syrup on a wick incredibly down to 4 cents. Unbelievable. Opportunity of a lifetime to have bought at those prices, but it was a wick. Then we have been kind of pretty much range bound. If you look, we've been range bound here for pretty much the majority of the end of 2025. Following the all-time high, as with everything else, we have started to see a retracement in the market. And I have already marked off some very, very key lines here for Maple Finance. Reason being is, and I've covered this a lot on streams. Let's make sure I've got the right screen up. People are always going to try and find ways for why the market has come down. Donald Trump is to blame. Jane Street is to blame. Who else was blamed recently? Jane Street. The FUD in the market is a result of the fact that Zach XBT is saying things about people. It's scaring people off. We're talking about blaming people on Solana. Okay, not one single entity is responsible for where we are. We are in a market cycle. Bitcoin tops roughly 18 months after the halving, and it normally tops in Q4 of the post-halving year. The good news is that we know that it bottoms around about 12 months after the all-time high. So if we topped on October the 6th, roughly October the 6th, 2026 will be where we bottom out. Now, October the 6th, we have the 1-year anniversary of the all-time high. We then have November the 6th, which is, of course, the midterms in America. Stock market comes down before the midterms. And if I just basically give you an example of what happens. So, in a midterm year, this is pre, and this is post midterms. Now, what tends to happen in stocks, shares, absolutely everything, you see this. Okay? The market outperforms after the midterm and underperforms before the midterm. So, going into November, we're going to see weakness everywhere. Coming out of the midterm, we're going to see strength because of the uncertainty of the election. How well has Trump done? Pretty much most presidents suffer and struggle at the midterms. Joe Biden did. Trump did in his first. Obama did. They all struggle because it's 2 years in to their term. That's why it's called the midterm. So they're going to struggle. The markets don't like uncertainty. Now, the one thing about Trump is because he won the election by such a landslide, we're not likely to see a huge loss, but it will affect the price of all of these tokens. Now, the reason I'm giving you all of that information is I think, if we just drag this along to here, I think what you need to do for Syrup is look at where the accumulation range is and where the next levels of resistance and support are going to be. Now, luckily, prices give us clues. They leave clues for us to go and look at. And you can see these different areas here of resistance and support. Okay? So we don't have to be rocket scientists to draw lines through these pockets of resistance and support. And again, we are not talking about pockets of support that are from the last week. We're talking about pockets of support from many, many other times. And again, we could, if we wanted to, there is another line on here. I don't want to fill the screen with lines. But if we wanted to draw that up to about there, look what we have there as well. We have all of that over there. That became resistance over here. So support turned into resistance. Resistance can turn into support. Now, the red zone we are in, we're going to call it the red zone. We're going to start talking about Fib levels here. The red zone is what I call the kill zone. But some channels don't like that word, so we're going to call it the accumulation zone. Anything for me below 27 cents is accumulation, which means that I believe that anything in here is a good risk reward ratio. I believe that syrup below 27, 28 cents is a buy opportunity. Now, many people will sit here and tell you that you should hold syrup, it's going to go to $5. I am not like that. I am going to tell you where I will be selling syrup, because that's the difference. I think we will be looking at taking profits at probably this level here, which is about 36 cents. Now, that is a 70% move from where we are now. So it's a substantial move, okay? But we're not thinking about taking profits this second. We're talking about where we will take profits. Remember, we looked at World Liberty Financial probably 2 weeks ago. Said the same thing. You buy below 10 cents. You buy below 11 cents. You take profits at 20 cents. You're not in this to hold these tokens without trading them for 5, 6, 7 years. And the reason is, if I sell syrup here, I can buy it here. So if I sell at 40 cents and I buy back in at 20 cents, I get double my syrup tokens. So why am I just going to sit on my syrup? I'm going to trade my syrup because there's ranges to trade. Now, the price down here, is it down here because of the cycle? Yes. Is it down here because of what's just gone on today somewhere else? Yes. So therefore, is it a good accumulation zone? Yes. We've probably got this area here to accumulate syrup. Okay? Now, what is likely to happen is syrup is likely to do this kind of action, which means it's going to have opportunities for you to buy and sell. And that is how you accumulate more tokens without having to spend any money. What is not going to happen at all, no matter who tells you this, we are not going to do that on syrup. If, for example, syrup announces a major new partnership with Microsoft tomorrow, for example, you're going to see a God candle. And then what you're going to see is you're going to see it fall back down. Maybe it does that, okay? You sell there and you buy back there. And you always take profits. You always take profits. Because that becomes dry powder, which means that if there is what's gone on today and that happens and the price comes down here. And by the way, I believe most of this move down is a result of people front running what is happening today, which is also why I think Bitcoin hasn't really fallen too far below 63,000 yet. So that's where I would say I would go with syrup. The Oracle himself said that we would go to 22 cents. And I said, no chance. We're going to go to 27 cents. The Oracle is TA. The Oracle does charts. I don't. I was basing it off previous price action. He was right and I was wrong. But either way, we are in a position now where this is a solid price to buy syrup. But again, don't sit on your hands if the price gets up towards here or even here. But look at this. If you buy today, and I'm not saying that you should buy, I'm just giving you an idea. If you bought today at 21 cents and it does go back to 35 cents, you've made 75% profit. Okay? So you put $100 in, it gets to 35 cents, you sell, you've got $175. You take profits, you compound those profits, and that is how you become wealthy. People coming into chat saying, help, what do I do? You sell at these levels and you buy at these levels. You don't sit on them. You don't sit on the token. If you have 100 syrup tokens today and the price does this and you don't sell, how many syrup tokens have you got over here? You've got 100 because you've not sold. Okay? If you've got 100 syrup tokens today and you sell here and it comes back down here and you buy, you will buy 200 syrup tokens. You sell here, the price comes back down here. You have 400 syrup tokens. And suddenly, instead of having 100, you've got 400. And that's all you need to do. And listen, you buy the tokens today and it goes to 60, 70, 80 cents. You take some profits. Goes to 25, then 30, then 35 cents. You take some profits along the way. I'm not saying we're going to come back down to 21.5 cents, but I'm telling you that the bull run of the bear market isn't going to be over anytime soon, and it's going to be a minimum of October. So if we get to October and we're at 15 or 16 cents for syrup and you buy and it goes back to 60, 70, 80 cents, then you're looking at making a 5 or 6x. It's a simple trade. But we digress. We now need to move on to the question, which we have. Let me close that down. Leave that page. Good afternoon. When is syrup likely to reach $1? Syrup is not likely to reach $1 probably for the next 2 or 3 years. I don't believe it's going to reach $1. If I said July, you shouldn't believe me, should you? Because we're in a bear market. The only way syrup gets to $1 is if it has an absolutely unbelievable partnership announcement with somebody like the Bank of America, somebody like Goldman Sachs, somebody like BlackRock. But then again, ask yourself a question. Ondo is partnered with BlackRock and their token's at 20 cents. So I don't think anytime soon, it's not the market for it. I would say my long-term target is $1.20. Is XRP the way to be a billionaire? No, it's not. Because everybody telling you about those things is lying to you, I'm afraid. Hi, Crypto Warehouse, says Naro. Okay, right. Now, what we're going to do then, we've got a couple of minutes left. I've got 2 questions. And I've got to decide which one I'm going to read out. Okay, I'm going to give you Leo's question. I like them both, but I'm going to give you Leo's question because this is a really solid question. As TradFi rates eventually compress, what protects Maple's spreads from normalizing back towards traditional private credit levels? That's the question. Now, I'm going to answer that question from 2 angles, retail and institution. Institutions will see more and more options available to them for collateralized loans on Bitcoin. Absolutely. World Liberty Financial are doing it. Of course they are. But private credit is a very smoke and mirrors type of system where there are different types of private credit. There are family offices all the way through to large institutions. There's a whole plethora of private credit. And the one thing about private credit is it's not available to you. You can't go and invest in something. VCs are not necessarily private credit, but they're a good example of they get in, they take their pound of flesh, and then you come in and you get the scraps. Private credit is a way for very rich people and very rich institutions to deal with other very rich blue chip institutions that need to borrow at decent rates, and they're pretty safe. So it's not necessarily a case of Maple Finance is just going to be assimilated into TradFi, because private credit's always been a closed shop. That's the difference. Now, if private credit is a closed shop, what is Maple Finance doing? It's disrupting it. What did Amazon do to books? What did the Kindle do to books? What did Spotify do to music? What did Netflix do to films? They disrupted a traditional institution, which is private credit, in Maple's case. So what you're doing is, ask yourself a question. When was the last time you were allowed to be involved with private credit? And probably the answer is zero. You've never been asked. So as a retailer, private credit is safe loans where the institution could be a multi-billion-dollar institution and they want to borrow against their Bitcoin at 6%, 5%, and you're going to get 4.5% of that. So you're going to get maybe, I don't know what it is, 3/4 or 80% of that interest is going to you. So from that point of view, I don't think we go back. We've crossed the Rubicon as far as this is concerned. You've never had access to supply funds into a private credit system, number one. And institutions currently don't have that many options available for their Bitcoin. So if they go to their old, Sir Smythe and Smith and Co. in London and say, I want to borrow $100 million against my Bitcoin, he'll doff his cap and say, I do not know of Mr. Bitcoin. I do not know who he is. Please leave. Okay. So there is no option for them to do it right now, which is why Maple Finance has this market lead. So from that point of view, I don't think it compresses. What will compress over time, potentially, is the APY. Now, the APY will only compress based on market conditions. So, for example, in the bull run, we were running at 6.3%, 6.1%. We're now running at 4.5% because we're in a pretty much heading towards a recession. So the APY will change, but it will change with the market, not with the compression of TradFi with Web3, if that makes sense. So it's market conditions driving the interest rate. That's what we're looking at. And of course, as interest rates get cut by the Federal Reserve, of course, rates will come down. We could probably see an instance where Maple Finance is paying 3%, 3.5%. But that's based on market conditions. It's not based on competition. It's not based on anything else because it's a kind of a new industry. So that would be my answer to the question. It's 11:03. So, Leo, you have won. What I need you to do is give me your Binance user ID. And then I will send you some syrup tokens today. So you have won. Congratulations, Leo. I can't actually show it on the screen, I don't think. But he's called Leo Ton. At Leo Ton, you have won. He is on a different platform. So make sure you come over and you let me know. What are the questions? Is Solana a way to become a billionaire? Listen, okay. You're not going to become a billionaire in crypto. You're not going to become a billionaire in crypto. You are not going to become a billionaire by going all in on a token, okay? To become a billionaire, you would have needed to have maybe bought Solana at 50 cents and sold it at $235, okay? Those days are gone. Now, there is a very good chance at some point in your future you find a token that's a cent, 5 cents, that you buy, and you may very well be lucky to watch it go to $100, okay? But that is like winning the lottery. You need to spend your time in crypto accumulating wealth. And you accumulate wealth by selling when people are greedy and buying when people are scared. And people are scared right now, and these are good prices. But there'll be good prices in July, and good prices in August, and good prices in September. And then maybe November and December, the price starts to recover. You accumulate your wealth. You don't ever become a billionaire by buying a token and watching it 1000x. You have been lied to by whoever has told you these things. It doesn't work that way. Eddie, if Q1 rises to 35 to 40 at least once by the end, it will remain a very strong coin in the trade. I think so. I think the key here is we interviewed Ben Cowan. And Ben is is a Bitcoin maxi. And one of the things he was talking about was that the majority of projects in crypto don't have fundamentals, don't have strong fundamentals. And that's what we've been talking about on our channel for about 2 or 3 years, strong fundamentals. If you have a project which doesn't make any money, has 500,000 people using it and doesn't make any money, and doesn't really do anything different to anything else, then it will die. There are, 500 layer ones. 490 of them will die. You have 20,000 projects in crypto. 19,700 of them will die. You have to find companies that make money. I cannot stress that point enough. If you look at any project, if you come into chat and say to me, Solana, I would say to you, how much money does it make? Hyperliquid, how much money does it make? VX Chain, how much money does that project make? That is it's so much more important than anything else. I don't care about shiny NFTs. I don't care about shiny UIs and shiny websites and VCs that have got green dyed beards. I don't care. How much money do you make? That is all that is important. When Amazon, and I'm old enough to remember this, when Amazon started out, it didn't make any money forever. Everyone could see how it was going to make money. Everyone. I look at some of these chains right now, and they are not Amazon's. I don't know how they're going to make money. Who can compete? If I said to you, I'm going to start a five-a-side team, and on the left, I'm going to have Bitcoin, BNB, Solana, Ethereum, and XRP. That's my team. Pick me a team that will beat me. You can't, because there's very few players. Maybe Hyperliquid, okay? Maybe a few other projects that are on the horizon. Maybe Asta's going to do it. Maybe Plasma. Maybe Stable. Maybe some of the stable coin layer ones. Maybe in the future. But they're maybes. Why are you buying maybes? If you're Manchester United, you don't go and sign a 15-year-old because maybe he'll be the next Wayne Rooney. Man United will go and sign the 21-year-old next Wayne Rooney, or Liverpool will. But they'll sign someone who can do it today, not someone who'll do it in 6 years' time, because maybe he doesn't become the next Wayne Rooney. Maybe Sui is a dead project. Maybe Say is a dead project. Maybe they're dead and they're just bleeding out everywhere. So why do you invest in them? Look at projects that make money. It's the most important thing. And no one talks about it. And it's like being in a film. It's like being in the Body Snatchers. You're in the Body Snatchers, and everybody around you is being taken over by an alien fungus, right? And you can see it, and the last few humans alive can't see it. If it doesn't make money, don't invest in it. It's a simple strategy. Now, that is it from me today. Leo, you have won. I don't know. I've suggested you drop me your user ID. I will get that, and I will pay. Now, listen. This is really, really important that you understand this. If we go to here, I'm going to show you something right now that I need you to. Here we go. Profile. Oh, it's logged me out again. Oh, God almighty. I can't believe it logs me out in the middle of a stream. It logs you out in the middle of a stream. How does that even work? Right then. The reason I want to show you this is it's quite important. In 3 hours time, sorry. Where is it? The Oracle is back. And the Oracle will be showing you the interview with Ben Cowen. Ben Cowen has been on Crypto Warehouse. We interviewed him. This is going to be shown on Binance Square at 2 o'clock in 3 hours' time. So make sure you tune in for that. Am I actually on screen so you can see it? Perfect. Right then. Thank you for tuning in. Now, we do one of these every 2 weeks. But we've also got the Maple Quiz Night. I think that's next week. The Maple Quiz Night will be on Binance Square. You can play along and you can win prizes. So I haven't put it in the calendar yet because we can't do too many streams on Binance Square at one time. But we're going to do the Maple Finance stream. That will be fun. That will be something to get involved with. And you can play along. Now, that is it from me. Thank you for watching. You have been great. I have been Mike. This is Saturday morning's Maple Finance Q1 review. See you soon.